Carico. Ecco.
Adesso? Andando.
Sì, ci siamo.
Sta andando? Ok.
Ok, perfetto.
Ok.
Like a singer.
I am singer. Please, Alessandra, please don't sing giro tondo, ok, please.
Ok, ci siamo, io ti seguo da YouTube.
I know that Matteo will be very happy.
In caso chiudo.
Il link è qual è?
L'ho già inviato.
Perfetto, grazie. Ok, aspetta. Buonasera a tutti, vi ringrazio di essere qua stasera. Oggi abbiamo il secondo seminario della professoressa Alexandra Buha Dordevic dell'Università di Belgrado in Serbia. La professoressa Alexandra Buha Dordevic è qua come visiting professor, ma oltre a questo c'è ormai un legame tra l'Università di Belgrado e l'Università di Sassari da molti anni. La professoressa Buha Dordevic è venuta varie volte, quindi abbiamo sia collaborazioni da un punto di vista didattico con scambio di studenti Erasmus da Sassari a Belgrado, anche come stiamo tirando su vari progetti di ricerca. La professoressa è una biochimica, ma si occupa, tra le sue varie tematiche, si occupa di interferenti endocrini, di metalli pesanti, e poi in modo particolare anche di alcune problematiche riguardanti la biologia molecolare, microRNA, vari carcinoma del pancreas, con cui stiamo sviluppando una collaborazione. Il seminario di stasera verterà sugli interferenti endocrini. Sapete, sono qualcosa di molto... Interferenti endocrini intendiamo tutte quelle sostanze che possono essere chimiche e tossiche per il nostro organismo. In modo particolare noi ci riferiamo ai metalli pesanti, ma non sono solo i metalli pesanti, e tutto l'impatto che hanno queste sostanze sul nostro organismo di base. Si sta vedendo sempre di più negli ultimi anni quanto sia importante sapere cosa determinano i metalli pesanti. Si è visto l'insorgenza di tumori e si stanno scoprendo sempre nuovi tumori che sono condizionati dalla presenza dei metalli del nostro organismo, e parliamo di un'intossicazione acuta ma soprattutto anche di un'intossicazione cronica. Prendiamo i metalli. E come li prendiamo? Li prendiamo principalmente dalla dieta, dagli alimenti, ma anche dall'ambiente esterno, dalle industrie, dalle cementifici, ovvero tutto ciò che è collegato con l'ambiente. Quindi è qualcosa di molto attuale che interessa a tutti noi, sia noi che siamo nel campo, diciamo, scientifico-medico, ma un po' in generale la popolazione. Quindi parlerà in un inglese molto lento e ci dirà le ultime novità, i rapporti che ci possono essere tra salute, ambiente e degli interferenti endocrini. Ok, do la parola alla professoressa.
Grazie. Buonasera a tutti, io sono molto felice di essere qui. Grazie professore Madedu per il tuo invito. That's all I have. So now I will switch to English and I will speak about endocrine disrupting chemicals. This is the field that I have been working on for more than 10 years, and I will try to show you the importance of this topic. So for the very beginning, we will ask ourselves why we are talking about endocrine disrupting chemicals in recent time more and more. So let's first say that endocrine disrupting chemicals has become a growing concern when it comes to health. And these are some of the results of the economic analysis, because as you know, it is very important to have these numbers. If you are going to the Ministry of Health, if you are doing some discussion with the policymakers, you need to show them the numbers. So it has been estimated that exposure to endocrine disrupting chemicals contribute to disease and dysfunction with the annual cost, which are more than 10% GDP in the USA and more than 1% in Europe. Also, health costs linked to exposure to endocrine disrupting chemicals have been estimated to be over 163 billions of euros in Europe alone. And I will just tell you that these are definitely underestimated number, because it is very hard to precisely connect the exposure, for example, the exposure that a person has during the fetal development or in early childhood with a disease that is going to happen later on in adulthood. So these numbers are more likely to be much higher. It has been said recently that endocrine disrupting chemicals are a major health issue. Why? I will show you just some of the health endpoints that has been connected with the exposure to endocrine disrupting chemicals. So as you can see, alteration in sperm quality and fertilities, many abnormalities in sex organs, endometriosis, early puberty, altered nervous function, altered immune function, certain cancers, respiratory problems, metabolic issues, diabetes, obesities, neurological disabilities. This has all been linked to endocrine disrupting chemicals. And it is very important to note that recent investigation that has been done across the entire world has shown that the number of the that the sperm quality has decreased for 50% when it is compared to the sperm quality in 1950. So if we continue with these trajectories, there is this estimation that in 2040, more than 80% of couples will need to do in vitro infertilization in able to have children. So these are very, let's say, terrifying facts. And there are some scientists in USA that are very convinced that the human race at this point is endangered. Of course, endocrine disrupting chemicals and exposure to endocrine disrupting chemicals is not the sole factor for this problem, but it certainly does have important impact. And one more thing that we should not forget about endocrine disrupting chemicals is the fact that these chemicals are environmental pollutants as well. So they do pollute environment, and they have impact on environment. So when it comes to the impact, we usually talk about medicines as because medicine can also pollute environment. They can end up in our water system, and studies have shown that we have feminization of fish in almost all rivers in USA, which could be a serious problem in the future, and also a great amount of plastic pollution which is present in our environment. So let's see the definition. Let's see what endocrine disrupting chemicals really are. This is the definition given by the World Health Organization in 2002. There are some changes recently, but the essence is the same. So an endocrine disruptor is an exogenous substance or a mixture that alters function of the endocrine system and consequently causes adverse health effects in an organism or its progeny or subpopulation. So let's see the timeline. I hope I will be able to open this. Yeah, good. So this is the year when it all started in a way that we, for the first time, saw that something is happening with the chemicals when they enter the nature. So when it comes to drugs, you know, we always have to do a lot of testing before putting a drug into the market. So we have preclinical trials, we have clinical trials. But when it comes to chemicals, a lot of years, many years ago, it was possible to synthesize chemicals, just put it on the market. Nobody really expected any investigations regarding the effect of a chemical on the environment, on human health. And in 1962, Rachel Carson wrote a book, Silent Spring. I'm sure you have all heard about it. And this was a book that warned us about the consequences of the widespread use of DDT, pesticide that was profoundly used at the time. And the consequences were mainly about the effect that DDT had on animals. But later on, we found out that it has many effects on humans as well. So it was in 1962, and then in 1999, we have this endocrine disruption term firstly being coined. It was firstly used, so 33 years ago. It's not very new, as you can see. And this was the book that kind of prompted all. It was Our Stolen Future, 28 years ago, written by Theo Colborn, Diane Dumanowski, and John Peterson Myers. This book was published in 1996, and the preface was written by Al Gore. So it was very popular at the time, and it kind of started a chain of events when it comes to endocrine disrupting pollutant. So something later on happened in Europe as well. At the same year, in February, European workshop on the impact of endocrine disrupting chemicals on human health and wildlife. And then in 1997, European Parliament adopted the resolution on endocrine disrupting chemicals and finally took some regulations when it comes to legislation, research, and communication regarding these chemicals. So during this period of time, various reports and strategies were generated. A lot has been done ever since. For example, in 2018, we had the EFSA and the ECHA implementing the respective regulation of adoption of the criteria for the legal identification of endocrine disrupting chemicals. So if you have something legally identified, it is easier to regulate it and control it in the market. And this is us today. So various endocrine disrupting chemicals are still on the market, even though we have a regulation. I will talk a bit more about it later on. So let's go back to the definition. The definition says these are the exogenous substances or mixture substances. What does it mean? It means that endocrine disrupting chemicals are not hormones which are present in our body. They need to be exogenous, but at the same time, they can be of natural origin, as you can see. So they can be both synthetic and they can be natural. And this is very important because sometimes we overlook this fact that, and we also often think that everything that comes from nature is immediately safe, which is not always the case. And I will give you later on example about phytoestrogens. So, as I have told you, we have natural and synthetic endocrine disrupting chemicals. Natural are made and derived from nature, and synthetics are man-made. In potency, they do differ. Synthetic endocrine disrupting chemicals generally exhibit stronger hormonal activity, and they are more persistent in the environment when compared to natural endocrine disrupting chemicals. Exposure to natural endocrine disrupting chemicals often come from diet, while synthetic endocrine disrupting chemicals can be encountered through diet as well, but also through various consumer products and industrial processes. And at the end of the day, synthetic endocrine disrupting chemicals are better regulated because they are synthetic when we compare them to the natural ones. So these are some of the representatives. I'm sure you have heard about some of these. So BPA, bisphenol A, these are the chemicals which are part of the plastic, the hard plastic, and they are also present in our canned food. So these are the main ways of exposure to bisphenols. We also have phthalates. They are present in soft plastic. So for example, in toys. Phthalates are also present in perfumes, unfortunately. So if we are using very, let's say the best ones that stay for a long time, a period on our skin, they most definitely have phthalates, because phthalates are the chemicals that make them durable and make them stay long. Also, different pesticides can expose endocrine disrupting activities as well. PFAS chemicals, so-called forever chemicals. PFAS chemicals are present in Teflon, in non-stick cookware. So if you have non-stick cookware in your home, you definitely have PFAS chemicals in your organism as well. And also if you are using waterproof mascara or lip gloss that is very durable, they usually contain PFAS chemicals. Flame retardants, these were added to the carpets, to our furniture in order to reduce the danger of fire, but later on it turns out that they have some endocrine disrupting properties. Of course, heavy metals, we know a lot about them, and some of them can also expose endocrine disrupting properties. For example, cadmium is often called metalloestrogen because it can produce estrogenic effects. And at the end, phytoestrogens, because as I have told you, endocrine disrupting chemicals can be of natural origin as well. So here are some of the natural ones. So soy is very rich with phytoestrogens, essential oils, etc. So for example, having your baby soya infant formula is not a good health choice, because in that way baby is exposed to endocrine disrupting chemical with estrogen properties. So how can we be exposed to these endocrine disrupting chemicals? We can be exposed by inhalation, because some of them are, for example, present in the air we breathe. We can also be exposed to this chemical by ingestion, mainly through food or through water. We can be exposed dermally. This is basically connected to the exposure to cosmetic products. And unfortunately, most of them can pass transplacental barrier, and they can also enter breast milk. So we can be exposed via breast milk and placenta, so during fetal period of development and also during early childhood. And this is very important to say, because we are not susceptible and to endocrine disrupting chemicals in the same way during the entire life. There are some critical periods of exposure, and these critical periods of exposure are precisely fetal development and early childhood. So these are the periods when we have to be extremely cautious about exposure to endocrine disrupting chemicals, because in this way we can kind of influence the health of our children during their adulthoodness. So in the definition, you saw that there is this thing that says disrupt the function of the endocrine system. So they need to, they can make many toxic effects, many health effects in the organism, but these effects needs to happen through the endocrine system. That is very important in order for them to be classified as endocrine disrupting chemicals. So how do they do that? How do they interfere with our endocrine system? So some of them mimic hormones. What they do is they basically pretend in our organism that they are hormones. So they have, sometimes they have similar chemical structure, like estrogen, for example, and they will bind to the receptor and they will act as an estrogen. In other instances, they can also bind to the receptor, but completely block them. So they can prevent natural hormones from completing their function. They can also affect synthesis or degradation of hormones, of the natural hormones. And what they can also do is to change our body sensitivity to our natural hormones. So these are the ways that they can interfere with our endocrine system. One more thing which is very important when it comes to endocrine disrupting chemicals is a non-monotonic dose response, and I will now explain you this. So as a toxicologist, we always love to find the dose in which nothing is happening. So this is the no observable adverse effect dose that we are ingesting and nothing will happen to us. And when we find this dose, we immediately assume that all doses which are lower than these doses, than this particular dose, are safe. And this is the main postulate of toxicology. But when it comes to endocrine disrupting chemicals, many investigations and many studies have shown that they do not necessarily act this way. So if we are here and we say that this is safe, we cannot presume that everything lower than this dose is safe as well, because they have this non-monotonic dose response. So this is the main problem with endocrine disrupting chemicals. The main problem is basically finding the safety threshold, finding the dose which is safe, and beyond this dose, everything is safe. We cannot be sure with endocrine disrupting chemicals. They cause harmful effects on our health. We already talked about this, and they can be transmitted to our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. How? It was shown that they can have transgenerational effects. They can induce some epigenetic changes. What does this mean? This basically means that if a mother was exposed to endocrine disrupting chemicals, this exposure can have consequences on the health of their grandchildren and great-grandchildren, because in a way we are transmitting our exposure. So this is what some studies have shown. These studies are mainly animal studies, but epidemiological data also suggest potential transgenerational risk. So the question is, who are they affecting? And the answer is, unfortunately, literally everyone. But as I have told you, there are some critical periods of exposure during which we are extremely sensitive. So why do endocrine disrupting chemicals matter so much? They are everywhere, as you have seen. So we can be exposed to them via ingestion, via inhalation, via air we breathe, via ingesting our food. Transdermally, we can be exposed during the fetal period, through breast milk, so they are basically everywhere. Also, I have mentioned non-monotonic dose response, which basically means that very low doses can also cause harm. They have potentially delayed and transgenerational effects. So exposure during the fetal period can, for example, make somebody more prone to certain diseases, for example, to diabetes, to some reproductive problems later in adult life. And they can cause irreversible health damage. So the question is, what are we doing about it? Why they are everywhere? So there is a very good regulatory framework for endocrine disrupting chemicals. And since there are many scientific facts and many scientific studies that are showing their potential harmful effect on our health, regulations are getting more and more strict. But there are two things that are very important when it comes to regulation. Regulation is always in a way consensus between the risk and benefit. So risk is always present. We cannot make a situation when there is no risk, no matter what the regulations are. And the other thing is that regulations are slower than the research, because for a research to be introduced into the regulations, some years needs to pass. That it needs to be shown in many other research as well. So regulation is always in a way behind research, which is completely normal. But what to do in the meantime? In the meantime, we can protect ourselves by making some healthier life choices. And this is especially important during the pregnancy and during the period of breastfeeding, because during that time, our behavior in a way will our exposure will be transferred to our children. So I always love to finish the lesson with some of the tips. So something to have on your mind when you go back home. So some of the tips would be to always choose glass or stainless steel containers over plastic ones, especially for food storage and water bottles. So if you are using plastic, you should avoid microwaving plastic always, and you should also avoid washing plastic in a washing machine, because in that way the temperature will be very high and some of the endocrine disrupting chemicals can leak into your food. Also, when it comes to preparing food, you should opt for stainless steel cookware and avoid non-stick cookware, and also avoid treatments for carpets and furniture that offer stain resistance. When you see stain resistant, it really sounds great. You will have a carpet that can't be, if you spill something on the carpet, everything will be fine, but at the same time, you will have PFAS in your organism, which is not good. So better to have stain than PFAS in your organism. Also, if you are using plastic, check the recycling codes and try to avoid the ones with the recycling codes 3 and 7, because these ones are probably having higher levels of endocrine disrupting chemicals, talking mainly about bisphenols. And also, one very important thing is to prioritize fresh whole foods over ultra-processed or pre-packaged items. For example, fast food is usually packed in containers which contain PFAS, for example. That's why your hand won't be greasy when you finish with eating fast food, even though the food is very greasy. Daily habits to reduce exposure to endocrine disrupting chemicals in your home. So open windows, vacuum and dust often. This was intentionally men doing the dusting, so it's not impossible, you know. Limit the use of fragrances, avoid using plastics, and bead test is something to see whether there is a PFAS in your cookware. So if you put an oil and a bead is formed, there is a PFAS in a cookware. So try to avoid it. So to summarize everything, endocrine disrupting chemicals do disrupt endocrine system, and by doing so in a various mechanism and in a various way, they cause adverse health effects. They can be both man-made and they can be of natural origin as well. They are present everywhere. They can cause harm in very low doses. Effects are largely overlooked because the exposure can happen in early childhood and the effect can happen in adulthood. There are delayed effects of transgenerational effects as well, and these health damages are irreversible. I will again mention our society as a society that that is doing the research on cadmium and trace element toxicity. As I have mentioned, heavy metals can also be endocrine disrupting chemicals. For example, cadmium, as I have mentioned it's often called metalloestrogen because it was proven and it has been proven that it can interfere with the estrogen receptors, and in that way it can, for example, it can increase the risk of breast cancer development. So I would like to thank you all for the attention, and I can open floor for the questions if there are any. Thank you.
Allora, ringrazio la professoressa per la sua brillante esposizione. Come avete visto, gli interferenti endocrini in generale e in particolare i metalli pesanti li possiamo trovare dappertutto, in natura, nel cibo, nell'alimentazione, e dobbiamo seguire, cercare di avere uno stile di vita di un certo tipo per cercare di limitare la contaminazione degli interferenti endocrini, perché possono essere dannosi anche a livelli molto elevati sulla nostra salute. Se abbiamo qualche domanda, se qualcuno ha qualche domanda da fare.
Dico prima Parliamo in italiano. Volevo sapere cosa pensasse la professoressa sull'uso di sequestranti in infusione nel sangue come le DTA. Yes, I'm translating, okay. What do you think about the use in infusion, in blood infusion, about EDTA, sizing agent, to contrast the metals that could be done some problematic or other? Because in some places they use EDTA to size metals. What do you think about? No, not analysis, like a therapy. Yes, they use, sometimes they use. Yeah. Yes, yeah.
There is always a problem with chelating agents because they are not very specific. They will also bind some bioelements which are necessary for normal functioning. So what we actually say in toxicology is there is not a perfect antidote. And especially when it comes to toxic metal poisoning, there is not a perfect antidote. And this can be used only under the hospital conditions and only in instances when there is acute poisoning. So the levels are very, very high. Then you will use a chelating agent. In these instances, when there is not poisoning, you're just chronically exposed to low levels, there is no sense of using it. Thank you.
Altre domande?
Oh, so I wanted to know, among the EDCs that were mentioned, which one, in your opinion, is the most dangerous? And I also wanted to know what are the most affected organs?
Okay, so it's very hard to say which one is the most dangerous one, but I would say that bisphenols and phthalates are endocrine disrupting chemicals with proven serious health consequences. And why am I talking about them specifically? Because they are not so persistent in our body, which basically means that we can reduce the exposure to them by making some healthier life choices. So there are research that has shown that, for example, if you reduce the use of plastics for a month, you will have 56% lower levels of bisphenols and phthalates. So I'm speaking about them because in a way we can make a difference when it comes to these chemicals, and they are proven endocrine disrupting chemicals. As for the other question, these chemicals interfere with our endocrine system, and in a way they can make health effects on basically each organ and the system of the organism. Yeah, thank you.
Altre domande? Gli studenti, anche se era in inglese, non avete qualche dubbio, ogni tanto ne parliamo anche a lezione, sulle problematiche, possono avere metalli pesanti, dove le possiamo trovare, quali sono le complicanze che possono dare? Non avete nessuna curiosità? Normalmente è così. Quando sono tutti insieme nessuno fa una domanda. Poi vengono singolarmente, scusi, questa non l'ho capita bene, questo mi è chiaro. Yeah, sono emozionato. Va bene, dai, ok. Un'altra? Ok. Ormai avete dei colleghi più grandi.
And I also wanted to know, are phthalates and bisphenol also the easiest to avoid, or maybe the hardest? I don't know.
They are the chemicals that will be excreted from our body in the fastest way. That's why we can control them. But we can also control, for example, PFAS, the forever chemicals, by not using non-stick cookware, by not using the food containers which are for example, if you have a pizza and you put it in a cartoon container, it will definitely have PFAS on it. So the minute you notice that it's not greasy, be sure that there are PFAS there. Yeah.
Altre domande? Abbiamo uno studente che però la farà in italiano e poi cerchiamo di capirla in inglese tutti insieme. Please, prego.
No, se ci sono delle evidenze anche a livello epiteliale.
Ragazzi, almeno lui ha dei dubbi e ha coraggio di dirlo, perché poi non è che siamo tutti qua per imparare. A lezione, con la professoressa, tra di voi, con tutte le notizie che poi potranno essere utili anche domani al lavoro. Quindi, prego.
Siccome anche a livello polmonare, quando ci sono dei segnali, abbiamo i macrofagi che vanno a incorporare le molecole. Volevo capire se anche a livello epiteliale questo, o comunque a livello di altri organi, potesse essere un marcatore evidente.
E la seconda parte mi hai chiesto, hai detto, vuoi sapere se
Sia un marcatore evidente.
Very interesting question, thank you. It's about microplastic, right? So this is the topic that I haven't talked about because it's a really, really huge topic, so we don't have time for everything, but it's a very, very important question with regards to environment and our health. So microplastic is small pieces of plastic that are produced in our environment during years, and now we are facing the situation that we are now able to determine microplastic in almost every part of our body. So the studies have shown that microplastic can be found, for example, in our brain, in placenta, in our heart, in testes, in ovarium. So they're literally everywhere, and children are being brought to this world with a certain amount of microplastic. So far, we know, as you have mentioned, that microplastic can produce a very adverse effect on the level of lungs, also on the level of cardiovascular system, but we are still not quite sure what is actually happening in our body and what type of health effects they can produce. So this is a topic for future research. Future research will be, I'm sure, centered around the effects of microplastic on our health, because so far we know that it is present basically in every organ of our organism.
Altre domande anche in italiano? Qualcuno ha qualche dubbio, vuol fare la domanda all'italiano, poi la traduciamo? Tutto ok? Va bene, ok. Ok, it's a class question. Vai.
No, la traduzione.
Io? Sempre io?
Il nostro traduttore.
I swear this is the last one. And we had a doubt about non-stick cookware, and we wanted to know if
yes, we have to reduce the olive oil, so we need non-stick cooker.
And we weren't sure if it's bad, if it's bad to use non-stick cookware no matter what, or just scraping it, because we know that scraping it is dangerous, but just using it is.
Okay, so companies that make Teflon, they say that there is no any harm by just using it. But there are some PFAS chemicals which are forbidden now. So PFAS chemical is not just one. There are like more than 8,000 PFAS chemicals. Some of them are forbidden now, and they are not present in non-stick cookware anymore. But These are so-called regrettable substitutions. So they change them with some other chemicals, which are at this point, it is possible to use them. But the only reason for that is because we are not still quite sure that they're harmful. There are not enough evidence that they are not harmful. So it's kind of the other way, yeah. So we need to prove that they are harmful, and then they will be forbidden, you know. So for sure, it's not good to use a non-stick cookware when it is there are some scratches. It should be you should throw it right away. The other advice would be not to ever put like a empty non-stick cookware on a very high temperature. There needs to be something there, oil or the pancake mess, whatever. And also, don't use it all the time. Like, use it just for some time, like, I don't know, 1 or 2 times a week. I cannot quite say what is the frequency, but the general advice would be to use stainless steel, to prefer it to non-stick cookware.
Ok, grazie. Se non ci sono altre domande, siamo a posto. Ok, vi ringrazio per la vostra presenza e ringraziamo ancora la professoressa Alexandra Buha. Grazie.